Greetings, viewers, and welcome to what promises to be quite the outrageous episode of Unrepentant Geeking. I'm your host, Sean Cronenfeld, and today we will be taking a look at one of the more anticipated comic book releases of recent months. So, without any further ado, let us begin. I was born in 1979 and thus started to cross the line from adorable little fleshy thing that just crawled around all day to self-aware individual filled with sass and vinegar during the height of the 80s animation boom. On top of this, I had parents who found the idea of enforcing supposed gender norms on their kids both silly and potentially damaging, and thus I watched everything cartoon-related, whether it was designated for boys or girls. I just wanted to enjoy some colorful antics, and thus got as much of a kick out of, say, Rainbow Bright or My Little Pony as I did G.I. Joe and He-Man. They were all fun to me, and I also tended to get toys from a vast swath of shows and mix them all together and create elaborate crossovers and epic adventures where the girl toys got to kick every bit as much ass as the boy ones. Or conversely, playtimes where the boy toys, not that kind, you sickos, enjoyed dances and dates with equal fervor as their girl counterparts. Memories. Anyways, while I watched a great deal of cartoons across the 80s, I'd be remiss in not admitting that I did have my favorites. These included Transformers, The Real Ghostbusters, Brave Star, and, as you might have guessed from the topic of this review, Jim and the Holograms. Look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend Jim was much more than silly fluff meant to sell dolls, but at least it was glorious silly fluff meant to sell dolls. Even from a young age, I was a sucker for musical numbers, and here was a show that had such in spades, and with some of the most enjoyably ludicrous MTV music video-inspired imagery you could hope for to boot. And all ably abetted by the kind of happily preposterous setup one could only get from an 80s cartoon with toys to sell and zero fucks to give in regards to plausibility and realism. For those not familiar with the glory that is Jim, it centers around a young woman who discovers her dead father's secret project, namely a fully sentient supercomputer capable of creating and projecting insanely complex holograms via a number of methods, including, get this, a pair of star-shaped earrings. And then, for reasons that are never really completely explained, said girl decides to make use of said supercomputer in order to adopt a second persona named Jim, in order to front a would-be up-and-coming rock band, in order to have said rock band become the centerpiece of a new music label the young woman herself will run, while also helping maintain an orphanage for young girls on the side, as you do. Additionally, the girl in question had a boyfriend, who ended up possibly falling for her alter ego, or was it the other way around? My memory's a little foggy on this point, and honestly I think it tended to change as the plot of a given episode demanded as well. And thus setting up a needless love triangle that could have easily been solved by just revealing the truth to him, which shouldn't actually have been a problem since the reason the girl and her bandmates kept the secret of Jim's real identity a secret in the first place was never really quite established properly. Oh, and also there was an evil girl band who served as the show's main antagonist and who at times flat out tried to murder the competition, but everyone just took this in stride because, hey, it was the 80s, I guess. As I said, a preposterous premise, but one that was nonetheless pitched perfectly to draw in kids of the time like flies to honey. Of course, that was then and this is now, and as an adult now, I will freely admit that Jim and the Holograms was by no means great television. It was a marketing tool that, like many of its fellow shows, when the time was arguably more creative than it had any need to be, but at best remains a curio from another age. Oh, you could in theory try to bring back Jim and Company, but the question would be, how? I mean, the obvious approach would be to strip out the fantastical elements of the series and simply use the pre-existing characters as a launching point for more, relatively speaking, down-to-earth adventures. And indeed, that seems to be exactly the tack the upcoming live-action film remake of Jim is taking. Yet, I remain dubious. Sure, Jim's premise was needlessly convoluted to the extreme, but shorn of its more out-there aspects, all that you have left is a fairly generic setup of a rock band trying to make good. Not that you can't do some fun stuff with that, but, well... While I agree Jim the cartoon doesn't deserve to be on the same shelf as the true greats of the medium, such as Avatar or Animaniacs or Venture Brothers, that doesn't mean the underlying concepts of the show can't be made to work. What I've long wanted to see was someone take Jim, crazy sentient supercomputer and all, and turn it into something as capable of real emotion and compelling drama as it was silliness and glam. Which brings us nicely to the first issue of IDW's new Jim and the Hologram comic book, and if it's anything to judge by, then I may just be getting my wish at last. It should be noted that while the comic does take the basic setup of the show for its launching point, it's not actually directly connected to the continuity of the cartoon, nor for that matter the upcoming film either. Instead, we're given a new take on the characters that, while familiar, offers some key changes as well. The most important of these is that in the comic, Jerrica Benton, i.e. the real woman behind Jin, suffers from crippling stage fright when asked to perform around anyone else but her bandmates/foster sisters. Not only does this serve to make Jerrica more relatable to the audience, remember in general people fear public speaking more than they do dying, but it is an actual proper justification for the entire Jim secret identity rigmarole. Only as Jim could Jerrica truly express herself fully in a creative manner, and this is a brilliant tweak to the character that highlights the overall thoughtful approach series writer Kelly Thompson is taking with this incarnation. I find it particularly interesting that this first issue focuses entirely on the 4 initial members of the Holograms, to the point that aside from Synergy, no other characters have any lines of dialogue. Even everyone's favorite musical villains, the Misfits, don't even make so much as a cameo in the course of the issue. And, as it turns out, at least for now, they aren't really missed. Of course, I'm looking forward to their debut, but I didn't need them in this issue, and that just highlights how strong the interaction between the 4 leads of the book was. Thompson is clearly committed to making sure that Jim and friends remain recognizable as real human beings with both strengths and weaknesses alike. Over the course of the issue, it is revealed that the girls are still recovering from the recent death of their adopted father, who incidentally was the scientist who created Synergy, and that the forming of the Holograms is as much an attempt by the 4 to keep their familial ties strong in the face of both loss and becoming adults, as it is a bid for fortune and fame. Thompson gives each hologram a strong voice of their own, and this is especially nice considering how in the original cartoon, Jerrica and or Kimber tended to get the most attention and development, and along with the Misfits' propensity to steal the show with their colorful antics, it could often lead Aja and Shauna as little more than background players as a result. It's an issue that even the best stories of a large ensemble can struggle with, but at least in this first issue of Jim, it never becomes a problem. In the end, Thompson does a superb job of balancing the needs of making old-school Jim fans happy, while also leaving the book open and accessible for readers unfamiliar with the franchise as well. Not that the credit for this feat belongs solely to Thompson, and indeed, I would be hideously remiss if I did not give proper due to the contributions of artist Sophie Campbell. Campbell's been building a name for herself since 2003 via original indie projects and sites such as DeviantArt, and she's also worked on a number of established properties as well, including Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Fraggle Rock. I've been a fan of her work for some time now, but I think with Jim and the Holograms, she's reached a new level. This is an astoundingly gorgeous book that marks Campbell as one of the best artists working in the medium today. Campbell has long been known for her ability to present characters that break out of the usual mold that tend to dominate modern American comics, and Jim and the Holograms is no exception. Her redesigns of the characters encompass a full range of body types and goes even further than the original series in terms of racial diversity as well. She also gives each character a distinct face, something you'd be amazed how many comic book artists can struggle with, especially in terms of female characters. And similarly, the various outfits everyone wears strike a good balance between honoring the often colorful 80s wear of the original cartoon and something more appropriate for would-be stars of today. Campbell also has a firm grasp on action, such as in the wordless sequence that opens the book and features the Holograms attempting to record a performance only for Jerrica's natural timidness to get in the way. It's a terrific example of how comics can use art alone to tell a clear story to a reader, and it also bodes well for perhaps the biggest limitation this version of Jim has to overcome. I'm speaking, of course, about the fact that a comic book can't make use of music, which can be an issue for a franchise that previously was so reliant on songs as a storytelling device. Campbell's art, along with the equally superb coloring of M. Victoria Roboto, uses visual cues to represent sound, and it imbues even this initial failed performance with a strong sense of energy. Combine this with how well Campbell handles the more fantastical elements of the comic, such as when Synergy makes her grand entrance/introduction, and I'm left feeling confident that future issues of Jim will have no problem integrating musical performances into an otherwise soundless medium. Speaking of synergy, Campbell's new look for the sentient computer's holographic representation is perhaps her best redesign of the whole series. Gone is the bad 80s workout instructor look, and in its place is a design that gives the character an otherworldly and larger-than-life feeling. Synergy now towers over the holograms, and her slightly older features give her interactions with Jerrica and the others an almost motherly feel at times, which is all too appropriate considering the mentor role she often served in the cartoon. Campbell's doing the best work of her career in Jem, and it's clear this is not just some throwaway licensed work for her. Her passion for the series and its characters shine through on every page, and even without the equally compelling writing, Jem would be worth a buy just to look at all the pretty pictures. Overall, Jem and the Holograms 1 is an impressive debut, and the reboot fans of the old series have long dreamed of. Free of the constraints of TV network standards, the book could fully embrace elements such as Kimber being a lesbian that the show could only faintly hint towards at best. This gives the book more of an edge than its progenitor, but prospective readers need not fear that it's lost its kid-friendly credentials in the process. This is truly, truly, truly an all-ages book in the best meaning of the term, and one that anyone can and indeed should give a try. It's one of the best examples of taking an old franchise and breathing new life into it that I've ever seen, and I could easily give it my highest possible recommendation as a result. Simply put, Jem and the Holograms #1 is a comic book not to be missed. And that's going to do it for this episode of Unrepentant Geeking. Come back next time when I'll be presenting another episode of Blistered Reviews, featuring a review of the hotly anticipated upcoming 3DS title, Etrian Mystery Dungeon. Until then, for Channel Awesome and Unrepentant Geeking, I'm Sean Cronenfeld, wishing you all a rockin' good time.